Hello, welcome to Grandma's Closet. I'm Denise, and lots of you have been asking me to make videos for KicKee sewing tips, so that's what I'm here to do today. Today is all about the most important tools that you're going to need when you're sewing KicKee. You'll hear a lot of things out there. Should you use a serger? Is a regular sewing machine okay? Do you need special equipment? What kind of feet? What kind of needles? What kind of thread? We're going to cover all of that today. Don't be afraid. It's your KicKee after all. Have fun with it. You love it. Play with it. You can't break it. If you ruin one piece, that may or may not happen. You probably can fix it, and it's a learning experience. So buy some play condition clothes, buy some crafter squares, whatever. Just get out there and start playing. Okay. So let's talk about sewing machines, because I am sort of a sewing machine hog and I have 6 machines. I have 2 straight stitchers, one that I have set up just for shirring material. I have 3 different sergers because I use my serger a lot, mostly for doing seams and ruffle edging. And if it breaks down, I've got to have another one in service. And then I have a cover hem machine, and that gives you the nice sort of fancy dual stitching that you'll see on the edge of a KicKee blanket or on the edge of bindings. I'm going to show you a piece right here so you know what I'm talking about. Love this taffy stripes. You got those 2 even rows of stitching, and on the back it's a little bit of a stretch. It's called a cover hem stitch, and it takes a specialized machine to make that. Now, you can do everything here on just a regular sewing machine. You can do the 2 rows of stitching. Your back won't look just like that, but it will be serviceable. You can do overlock stitching like you do on a serger. Maybe the only thing that you can't do is finish the edge of ruffles so that they will look like this. I'm going to show you one of those. 1 minute, be right back. So those nice, beautiful edges of the ruffles right here, we do that with the serger. I can't do that with my straight stitcher, but everything else I can do. Making ruffles, everything. So let's talk about your tools. The most important, if you can only have one sewing machine, just get a regular straight stitch sewing machine. It is the workhorse of my operation, and I'll show that to you right here. So you can see it's just your regular standard sewing machine. Now, what else do you need? Well, you need the right feet to work with. So here's a zigzag foot. It's going to be standard with most machines, and this is going to do almost everything that you need. It will finish regular seams. It will sew over the tops of, if you want to put ruffles, adhere them to the back and you want to just sew down the front, just sort of all of your standard stitching. The next one I use almost every day is this little foot right here. It's called a gathering foot or a ruffling foot, and you'll see it has a little slot right here so that you can feed 2 pieces of material in. So the piece you want to ruffle feeds underneath. The piece you want to attach it to feeds inside. Now, forget all about that, because I never attach my ruffles while I'm making them. I just make my ruffles. And here's one, and they're beautiful, right? I mean, you guys love them. They've got great gathers. This is the tool I use, costs about $4. It is it's magic. Get one, you're gonna love it, and I'll show you how to use it in another video. But these are your tools, ladies. So just like I'm sure your hubby has, you know, a screwdriver for every job, hammers, saws, things that they never use but have to have, you have to have these. The next important tool that you need when sewing KicKee, you can do without it, but if you have it, it's a game changer. It is called a walking foot. and you'll see the bottom has little feed dogs that go over the top of the material, and then so the material will go between these feed dogs and then the feed dogs on your machine, and that will push everything through together at a very even rate. Now, when do I use this? I don't use it all the time, but I use it anytime that I'm doing some top stitching. So again, right here, this is a dual color ruffle. So for this, what we did was I sewed together two different colors, and then I top stitched it down. You see that nice even stitch? That is thanks right here to your walking foot. This little mechanism attaches right over your screw plate, so it will go up and down with the mechanism of the machine. Again, most important if you want to do beautiful top stitching, but it can be done without it. It's just going to take a little more patience on your part. Again, this was not an expensive piece of equipment. I mean, it was maybe 15 bucks. I don't remember. I've had it for a long time, but again, very inexpensive. Okay, so your sewing machine, you've got your feet. What about needles? Well, when I really use two different kinds of needles, and it depends on what I'm doing. If I am making ruffles, that is, I'm using the ruffling foot right here that I showed you, right? This neat little piece of equipment. And I want these, you know, nice, beautiful ruffles to feed through evenly. I use this right here. It's a stretch needle, and it is a 75 by 11. Now, what's important about this, it's got a very sharp point and it's very fine, so it will poke through your material as it's feeding underneath the ruffling foot. Because this doesn't sit really tight on the feet, which is what it allows the material to kind of glide through and ruffle like that, you need something that's going to poke through it. Otherwise, what will happen, what will often happen, is the material will get, instead of poked through, it will get pushed down right into your feed dogs. Your machine will eat your KicKee worse than your kid has ever eaten your KicKee. And that's not fun, especially if it's somebody else's KicKee, like what happens when I'm sewing. So always make sure I use the right needles and change needles frequently, ladies. They get dull. I mean, they look great to you, but trust me, they get dull after quite a few uses. So if you're having an issue, change your needle. That often is a game changer. It solves everything. The other needle that I use, and I use this if I'm doing seams, top stitching, anything other than ruffling, it's a jersey needle, and it's an 80-12. It's ballpoint needle. So what that does with KicKee especially is it allows the needle to poke through the fibers when it's sewing the stitch, rather than poke a hole in the KicKee when it's sewing a stitch. Again, it will give you a much nicer, it gives you a much nicer look and a much nicer finish. But really, that's it. Those two needles are going to get you everywhere. I buy them in bulk because I go through a lot, and I'd rather have sharp needles. It's like a sharp knife, right? It works so much better, saves you a lot of aggravation. Okay, what else do I use around here? Well, a couple of things that I know a lot of you ladies are already using. We've got these really cool little clips, right, to hold your material together as you're feeding for the seams. That's perfect. I use it quite frequently on KicKee if you're putting together blankets, or if I'm making dresses or rompers, anything like that, and I've got a long stretch of seam to sew. I use these clips, but I also use straight pins. Now, there's some folks that will say you can't use pins on KicKee. Well, there are times when you have to use a pin on KicKee. So if you ever wanted to, for example, change out the binding on a collar, and I've done a video on that, you can't really hold it back on with clips very well, because you'd have to move them too often, and it's very slippery the way that the binding goes on. So we use pins, and we pin it close together. And you want to make sure your pins aren't catching on another piece, but they're fine to use. So again, we use ballpoint pins, right? So that's important. And these right here, they're size 17. So they're an 1.1/16 long, not very long, but they're extra fine. So it's got a 5mm shaft. So that goes through the KicKee material really wonderfully. So that's what you're looking for, is a ballpoint extra fine pin, and you can use that. I also use it when I'm finishing my ruffles down the snaps to hold the material in place. So there are a couple of things. A seam ripper. I think most people have one of these. If not, I mean, like, you know, get 3 or 4 of them. Again, they're nice when they're sharp. There is a little bit of a blade in there. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to need to take it apart. You're going to take KicKee apart so you can maybe take the binding off a blanket, take bindings off of coverall wrists. You might want to undo the seam on snaps on a coverall so you can get those ruffles inserted. Beautiful, right? They're so gorgeous when they're done that way. Get a couple of these. Again, these are your tools. Don't be afraid to spend a couple of bucks so that you can do things that are going to make you happy and really add to your family. Okay, what else is important? Have a tape measure handy. One of these is really good. You always want to be measuring. Measure twice, cut once, measure twice, cut once. Sometimes you're going to mess up. Then you'll probably measure 3 or 4 times and cut once. But make sure you have one of these on hand. Next, really important tool. You can cut KicKee with scissors, right? A nice sharp pair of scissors will do a good job. But you can't beat a rotary cutter. So I use an Olaf 60mm. I don't change my blades as often as I should, but always have a couple of extra blades on hand. This will go through a couple of layers of KicKee and give you a nice straight cut. That, along with one of these nice little flat edge rulers to guide it, and a cutting mat. So those are some of the primary tools that you're going to want when you're working with KicKee. So you've got your, again, let's talk about your feet for your sewing machine. You've got your walking foot for top stitching. You've got your zigzag foot for pretty much everything that you're going to do. And we have the ruffling foot, right? There we go. You've got your needles. Right, you've got your 7511, or you can do 7010s, but you definitely want a stretch, very fine needle for maneuvering through the ruffling foot. 8012 ballpoint for everything else. You've got your ballpoint pins, extra fine, and you've got your clips for holding your material in place. For cutting, regular scissors. Your rotary knife, that's going to cut you your nice strips of fabric, squares, patterns, anything like that. You've got your, God, I don't even know what this is called, but I call it my clear ruler, and it holds the fabric down and it guides your rotary blade so you can cut a nice straight edge. Tweezers. I use these all the time when I'm maneuvering fabric, right? Trying to feed it through the machine, and I just want to grab the little edge. I want to maybe pull some pins out, and you'll see in some of my videos, you'll see I'm using the tweezers. I have a couple pairs of tweezers around. They're just regular tweezers. They'll do a wonderful job. And maybe last but not least, this is really, really important, ladies. KicKee, as you know, tends to be a little pilly. So what does that mean when you're sewing? It's going to make a mess of your sewing machine. And when your sewing machine gets dusty and the mechanisms get dusty, they're not going to work very well. And it's going to grab your thread and you're going to have like a bird's nest. It's going to be a mess. You won't be able to get anything to sew correctly. You'll change your needles. You'll do everything right. And you're still going to have a mess. What do? you want to keep your machine very clean. And what do I use for that? Ta-da! Pipe cleaners. They're beautiful. They're flexible. They get into tight places and they'll pull all of that dust out. And so, especially underneath the bobbin, areas like that, you want to make sure that after every few projects, you pull that out, you clean it up and pull all the dust. You'll see how much dust gets in there. I don't think you'll be surprised, though, when you think about how pilly KicKee can be. It can wreak havoc on your sewing machine. Keep it clean. You won't have a problem. So that's it for my first video. I hope that these tips have helped you out. Get started, have fun, have courage. See you later.